Good evening, everyone. I'm David Selberg, CEO of Hospice of Santa Barbara. We have quite literally hundreds of folks participating tonight from faraway countries such as Argentina and the Philippines. So thank you all for being with us. And a very special thank you to our lead sponsors, the Natalie Orfila Foundation and Lou Buglioli, the Ridley Tree Cancer Center, and Santa Barbara Foundation. All are sponsoring our entire Illuminate Speakers series, and we're so grateful for them. Now I have the pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague at Hospice of Santa Barbara, Charles Caldwell. Charles, hello.
Hi there, David. It's good to be here tonight. I'm so looking forward to hearing Daniel's talk. Had a chance to briefly touch base with him previously, and he's such a wonderful gentleman. As many of you know, Hospice Santa Barbara is a local nonprofit that's been serving families coping with grief for life-threatening illness for the past 47 years. Our motto is compassionate care, freely given. And that reflects that all our services are completely free, 100% supported by the community. During the pandemic, we created this Illuminate speaker series to speak to the anxiety, the fears, the struggle that people were experiencing as we move through this journey together. And we're offering it free to all those in attendance. But we can't do that alone. With that, we need your help. So we'd like to ask you to consider making a donation to help support the future of this series. And you can do so by making a gift today by going to our website, and you'll see where to go in the chat feature. So that's it for me. And David, now back to you.
Thank you, Charles. Now I have the pleasure to introduce our featured Illuminate speaker, Daniel Goleman. Daniel Goleman is an internationally known psychologist and science journalist. His 1995 book, Emotional Intelligence, was on the New York Times bestseller list for a year and a half, with more than 5 million copies in print worldwide in 40 languages. Daniel is a lifelong student of meditation, and his most recent book is titled Altered Traits. Science reveals how meditation changes your mind, brain, and body. So without further ado, we present to you Daniel Goleman.
David, thank you for that introduction. I'm really happy to be in Santa Barbara, at least virtually, because for one thing, I have relatives in the city, and the other is I have a lot of friends here. I really like Santa Barbara. I've visited many times, even though I live on the East Coast. And speaking of the East Coast, I have to ask you to imagine, if you've never been there in the winter, a wintry day on Cape Cod, where there's something called snow. And there's a 5-year-old boy who wants to go out and play. His mom says, "That's fine, but put on your snowsuit first." And at that, he has a tantrum. He's on the floor, pounding the floor. "No, I won't do it. I won't do it." Then all of a sudden, he gets up without saying a word, goes to his room, stays there for a few minutes, comes out with his snowsuit on, and goes out to play. But before he gets to the door, his mom says, "Hey, what just happened?" And he says, "Oh, well, my guard dog got upset, so I had my wise owl talk to it." That's neuroscience for a 5-year-old. He learned it in school, actually. The guard dog is a way of talking about the amygdala. It's the brain's radar for threat. And it's always asking, even now, in all of us, in each of us, am I safe? And of course, during the COVID pandemic, the guard dog, the amygdala, has been in overdrive because there have been real dangers. And we can exaggerate those dangers. We can think about or worry about what might happen, the worst case scenarios. We can do what's called ruminating, where you over worry. You know, worry is very functional if you think of something you can do and then you turn off the worry. But if you keep worrying, if you keep that anxiety going, you wake up 2 a.m. and it's the first thought that comes to you. That's called rumination, and it's really unhealthy. This kind of over worry is very easy, of course, during the pandemic, and it might be a little hard to stop because we've gotten so used to it. And one of the jobs of attention is one of the jobs of emotion, like worry, is to fixate attention. Emotions tell us what to pay attention to, what's important right now. And during the COVID pandemic, of course, it's been our health and the health of people we care about and love. But as I said, there can be too much, and constant anxiety is really stress. And stress does many negative things to the body, including, ironically, lower immune resistance. So our worrying about COVID, in fact, can make us more susceptible to the virus. It's due to a stress hormone called cortisol. It's released when the amygdala triggers anxiety in the body. Cortisol floods the body. It gets us ready to fight or flee, but it does many things that are not so good. It takes blood from the organs and gives them to the limbs. And as I said, it lowers immune resistance. It also makes our thinking fuzzy, interferes with clear thinking. So this whole state, which technically is called sympathetic nervous system arousal, is a state that we need to do something about. And the good news is we can. Because if we can learn to be calm, or if we have a method to calm ourselves down, then we can be clear. We can make better decisions. And if we can be calm and clear, we can be kind. And I'll explain how all of that works. First, let me share with you a simple method from yoga, which is used to calm people quickly. In fact, it's used by the special forces, but anyone listening can use it in their lives. It's a way of marshaling the resources of what's called the parasympathetic nervous system. This is a different mode of being where you actually calm down the body and you clear the mind. And remember the wise owl? The wise owl that talked the guard dog down from being triggered stands for the prefrontal cortex. This is the brain's executive center. This is the part of the brain that lets us think clearly, make good decisions, plan, and so on. So this is a simple method you can use on the spot. I know many of us are so very busy, but let me tell you how it goes. Very simple. You take a deep breath, inhaling so your tummy expands. You hold it for as long as is comfortable. Then you breathe out very slowly. Then you take another deep breath. Hold it as long as you can. And then exhale very slowly. And do this 7 or 8 times, if you can, right on the spot. And the research on this says that this physiologically calms the body. So it shifts us from that sympathetic nervous system and that mode of anxiety to the parasympathetic nervous system. It calms us. It helps us recover. Then there's another method that I saw demonstrated. Actually, this was a class of 7-year-olds in Spanish Harlem, which is a very impoverished section of Manhattan. These kids all live in housing projects. They have a very traumatic childhood. One day, a little girl came in very upset, and the teacher said, "Why are you so upset?" She said, "I just saw someone who was shot." And she said to the class, "How many of you know someone who's been shot?" Every hand went up. It's that kind of childhood, very, very difficult. And I was told before visiting the class that half the kids had special needs, things like attention deficit disorder, hyperactivity, and so on. I thought it would be really chaotic, but when I got there, the class was perfectly calm. And I said to the teacher, "Why is that?" And she said, "Well, watch this. We do it every day." They call it belly buddies. One by one, each child went to their cubby and got their favorite stuffed animal, found a place to lie down on a rug, put that animal on their tummy, and watched it rise on the in-breath, fall on the out-breath, rise on the in-breath, fall on the out-breath. They did it for 3 or 4 minutes. And when they got up, they were very calm, very clear. This method, which is called mindfulness of breathing, has been found to enhance what's technically known as cognitive control, the capacity to let the prefrontal cortex be in control, the wise owl, not the guard dog, or to recover from being aroused, from when the guard dog gets aroused. You may know about the marshmallow test. It was done at Stanford many years ago. It's a pretty famous bit of research in psychology. 4-year-olds were brought into a classroom, or not rather, actually, I think it was a closet. It was used for the experiment. Sat down at a little table, a big juicy marshmallow put on the table in front of them. And then the experimenter says to the child, you can have this now if you want, but if you'll wait and don't eat it till I come back from an errand, you can have 2 then. And then the experimenter leaves the room and that poor kid is left staring at the marshmallow. I've seen videos, very funny. Some of them will look away just to, distract themselves from temptation. Others will sing and dance to forget about the marshmallow. And about a third of the kids grab it on the spot and just gobble it down. A third wait out the endless 7 or 8 minutes and they get 2. The payoff came 14 years later when they're about to go to university. The kids are tracked down, and it turns out that the kids who are still able to delay gratification in pursuit of their goals, which is what this is a test of, were the ones who didn't eat the marshmallow. And that group got along better with their friends, and they had an astonishingly higher test result on the SATs, the then universal college entrance exam. This was unexpected, but what it says is that the guard dog, the amygdala, and that arousal interferes with the ability of the prefrontal cortex to learn. That's what that showed. There was a study done in New Zealand where kids 4 to 8 were assessed for cognitive control, tracked down in their 30s, and it turned out the ones with better cognitive control by the time they were 8, even if they didn't have it when they were 4, had a better income in their 30s and better health. So there's a huge payoff. And surprisingly, cognitive control predicted these outcomes better than childhood IQ and the wealth of the family they grew up in. It's a great leveler for social and economic inequities. Maturity has been defined as widening the gap between your first reaction, or what you want to do, your impulse, and your final response. The longer that gap is, the more you can reconsider, the more you can think about, the more you can be effective in how you finally respond. And that takes this cognitive control. There's another method I want to show you, which if you do daily, will help enhance cognitive control at any age. This is for adults, it's for kids. It's an adult version of the belly buddies that I told you about. It goes like this. Sit up in a kind of dignified but relaxed pose. Close your eyes if you're comfortable. And just bring your full awareness to your breath. Be aware of the full in-breath, the full out-breath, any pause, the next in-breath, the next out-breath. And continue that. And if your attention gets pulled away, if you start going down some train of thought and you realize what's happened, you notice I'm thinking, I'm not being aware of my breath, then just bring your attention back to your breath and start with the next one, the inhalation, the exhalation, and keep going again until you find you're wandering off, and then bring your mind back. That's all there is to it. But the more you do it, if you do it every morning for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or even longer, you get benefit accordingly. There's a kind of dose-response relationship, it turns out. The more time you put into the exercise, it's like physical exercise, the better the benefit. And in fact, the brain is what's called plastic. That is to say, we can change and strengthen circuitry in the brain at any point in life by giving it systematic training. And this is that kind of a training. The benefits have been very well studied. I just did a book called Altered Traits with neuroscientists at the University of Wisconsin. And we looked at all the best research on meditation and mind training like this. And what we found was that the benefits from this breath exercise are pretty immediate. People become calmer. The more you do it, the less likely you are to be triggered to have that guard dog go off. You'll be triggered less strongly and you'll recover more quickly. The technical definition of resilience is how quickly you recover from your stress arousal. So this helps you in all those ways. And there's some surprising benefits. There was a study done at Stanford more recently than the marshmallow test, where they had people do 10 minutes of this breath awareness, and then they assessed what happened to them during multitasking. And you know, if you're completely absorbed in something that's really important today, your focus and attention is very high while you're absorbed in it. But then if you think, oh, I better check my email, or what was that text, or what about Twitter? And you roam around the e-world for a little while, then you come back while your attention was originally up here, now it's here, and it takes a while to ramp up, except it turns out if you did mindfulness of breathing, which is a training in concentration, then it takes you very little time to ramp up, or you don't need to ramp up at all. This was a study at Stanford, as I said, but more interestingly, right here in Santa Barbara, at the University of California, Jonathan Schooler and his group did a study of this same method, and they found that with undergrads there, people who were in breath awareness training compared to a control group, and they're randomly assigned, did better on their GRE exams. This was a surprise, but it means your working memory is better. The training was done by someone there in Santa Barbara, Dawa Tarchin Phillips, who's a meditation teacher. If any of you locally are interested, I recommend Dawa. He's an old friend and he's very good at what he does. So there are many, many ways to get this relaxation effect. If you're interested in finding about some others, I've done an audio called Relax, so that you retrain your body to recover quickly from stress. And now let's talk about that. I talked about being calm and being clear. What about being kind? There was a classic study that was done at Princeton at a seminary for divinity students, where half the students were given a topic for a practice sermon. It was the parable of the Good Samaritan, the one who stopped to help someone in pain and distress by the side of the road. And then the other half were given random Bible topics. Each of them was given some time to prepare, and then one by one, they went to another building across a courtyard to give their practice sermon and be evaluated on it. Well, as they crossed the courtyard, they passed a man who was bent over and moaning in pain. And the interesting question is, did they stop to help the stranger by the side of the road? More importantly, did it matter if you're pondering the parable of the Good Samaritan? Unfortunately, it didn't matter at all. What made the biggest difference was time pressure. If you thought you were late, no way are you going to even notice that person over there. And in fact, there's a spectrum of awareness that runs from total self-absorption, my to-do list, my whatever I'm thinking about, to noticing there's another person present, to tuning into that person, empathizing. What are they feeling? Oh, they're in distress, you notice. Well, can I help? And then acting with compassion to do something for that person. So it's the spectrum that runs from self-focus to other focus to actual compassionate action. This is very, very important. And the question that we can each ask in our lives is, do we notice the people that we can help that are within reach of us, each of us? And how can we help? That's the question that comes up. This has to do with some circuitry called the social brain, which is relatively newly discovered. The first discovery actually, I think, came from in a lab in Italy, where they're studying a neuron, a brain cell that only moved, it was in a monkey, only moved when that monkey raised its arm. And one day the cell was firing and the monkey wasn't moving, and they're very puzzled. What's going on? Then they realized, hot day in Italy, lab assistant gone out for a gelato. He's standing in front of the monkey, and every time he lifts his arm to take a lick, the monkey's brain cell for the same movement fires. That was the discovery of what are called mirror neurons. And it turns out the human brain is peppered with mirror neurons. They tell us what the person in front of us is feeling, what they're intending, what they're doing. It helps us keep an interaction on the same page. And there are many, many different circuits now that have been discovered, and mostly in the forebrain, that create a brain-to-brain link between people that tells us instantly, unconsciously, automatically what's going on with the other person. And in fact, it creates inside us a mirror image, a mimicry of what that other person is feeling. This is very important, for example, for rapport. There are three ingredients of rapport. The first is full mutual attention. If you're not both paying attention to each other, not going to happen. The second is a side effect of that. If you made a video of two people who are really simpatico, really in rapport, and you did a replay and turned off the sound, it would look like they were orchestrated, like they're choreographed. Their movements are flawlessly coordinated. And the third element of rapport is that it feels good. You know, one of the things that makes a day good is that we had an interaction like that. What a great day. I had a really good time with my friend or with my spouse or my kids, whatever. It's important to know there are three kinds of empathy, each of which is based on a different part of the brain, different circuitry in the brain. The first is cognitive empathy. This means I know how you think. I know how you see things. I know your perspective. I know the language you use to talk about this. That means I can be a very effective communicator with you because I know what terms you'll understand, for example. The second kind of empathy is emotional empathy. This is social brain empathy. It means I know what you feel because I feel it too, which is usually very good. But, you know, in some professions, like frontline professions, like nursing, for example, these days, if people you're dealing with are distressed or in pain or frustrated or angry, you pick that up. And if you don't clear it, if you don't metabolize it, if you don't have a good self-management strategy or ability, then it builds up and it leads to emotional exhaustion, which can culminate in burnout and leaving the profession. It's a big problem in the health world. But we don't have to let that happen. The third kind of empathy actually is an inoculation against empathy distress. It's called empathic concern, and it's based in the mammalian caretaking circuitry. This is the same part of the brain where every mammal has the same love for its offspring. This is a parent's love for the child. And if we can feel that, it's the source of compassion. So if we can stay present, for example, to that kid who was having the tantrum, the mom was present because she loves him. If you love the person, you can register the distress, but it doesn't overwhelm you. You can be there for the other person. And I think that this kind of empathy, empathic concern, is one of the roots of compassion. And in hospice work or whatever kind of strong emotions, that we're dealing with strong negative emotions, this kind of empathy, empathic concern, caring about the person is an inoculation against us becoming overwhelmed by what's going on. And let me share with you a third method. This is one that my good friend Sharon Salzberg has been teaching for many, many years. It's called the circle of caring. And again, if you'll sit up in a dignified but relaxed posture and close your eyes if you're comfortable, just repeat to yourself this phrase. Bring to mind people in your life or a person in your life that you're grateful to, who's been kind to you, and wish that person the following. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May your life be fulfilled. May you thrive. Just repeat these phrases mentally, silently, over and over, aiming them at that person you're so grateful to. And now focus on yourself and say, may I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I have a life of fulfillment and ease. May I thrive. And repeat those wishes for yourself over and over, silently. And now think of people you love, the people you naturally care about, and wish them the same. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you thrive in life. May you have ease and fulfillment. Just make those wishes over and over for the people you love. And then bring to mind people whom you know, who are acquaintances, or just outside that circle of those you love, but who you run into, who you know, and make those wishes for them. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you have a life of fulfillment and ease. May you thrive. Spend a little time making those wishes to that wider circle. And now just think of everyone everywhere. There's 7 billion people on this planet. Send them all the same wishes. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you have a life of fulfillment and ease. May you thrive. Make those wishes for everyone everywhere, over and over. And that's it. The more time you spend doing this, again, the greater the benefits. And here in our study of the research findings, it turns out that the brain is primed to love, that people get benefits from this simple exercise that are very practical, helping people who are in need, being more generous in charity, being kinder in general. It pays off pretty much right away. So here again, some people, for example, will do the breath exercise and then end with the circle of caring. That's a very effective way to do it. Let me wrap up with 2 stories. One is about a friend of mine, Paul Ekman, who is a world expert on the facial expression of emotion. And he wanted to study another friend, Matthew Ricard, who was an interesting guy. He started off as a neuroscientist, as a molecular biologist, in France at the Pasteur Institute, but decided to dump that career. He went to Nepal and became a monk and pretty much meditated for most of his life. And his publisher, I think, called him the happiest man in the world. He's very happy, brain studies show. His circuitry for positive feeling is very active. But Ekman wanted to know what would happen if this guy, this happy guy, had a debate with someone who was really argumentative and confrontative. So Ekman did a confidential phone survey at the University of California at San Francisco and asked people there, actually, I think it was at Berkeley, who is the most confrontational, difficult, argumentative professor on the faculty? Oddly enough, almost everyone agreed who that was. So he calls Professor X and he says, in the interest of science, would you participate in an experiment? And professor says, yes, of course. But then as the day grew near, he started making demands which were increasingly difficult, and they had to dump him, go with the second most difficult guy, professor. And the day comes and the professor and the monk are wired up on their heart rate and so on, and they're being videoed, and they're having a 15-minute debate on the proposition that the professor, who has full tenure, should give up his tenure and go to a hermitage like Matthew did and meditate for the rest of his life. And the professor from the get-go is very upset. No way is he going to do this. But over the course of the 15-minute debate, Matthew stays totally calm. He was calm from the start. And the professor gets calmer and calmer and calmer. At the end of 15 minutes, he's having such a delightful time, he doesn't want to stop. It shows that emotions are contagious. Negative emotions, yes, we can get more distressed, but positive emotions too. In fact, I started the book Emotional Intelligence with a story about a bus driver in New York on a hot, humid, ugly autumn day, August day. It's a day when everyone in the city has this bubble, don't touch me, don't talk to me. Bus pulls up, I'm waiting for the bus. I get on, my bubble intact, and the bus driver did something very disarming. He looked at me and said, as though he really meant it, how's your day going? And I was a little undone, but I sat down with my bubble still with me. And then I realized he's talking to everyone on the bus. You're looking for suits, are you? There's a great sale in this department store up here on the left. And see the Cineplex here on the right. I know the one in Cinema 6 got great reviews, but I saw the one in Cinema 3 last night. Really great. I recommend it. Oh, and this museum up here, they're having a great show, and on and on and on. People would get off the bus and he'd say to them, I hope your day's wonderful. And people would really feel it from him. He was spreading positive emotion. And I think that this is the moral, that no matter what we're doing, no matter what the interaction is supposedly about, the undercurrent of feeling can be one where we leave the other person feeling a little bit better. David, over to you.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for both your poignancy and your enlightenment with this conversation tonight. And now I have the pleasure to introduce members of our panel who truly represent the best of our Santa Barbara community, Jackie Carrera and Rod Latham. Jackie Carrera is the president and CEO of Santa Barbara Foundation, where she provides leadership to promote the fulfillment of Santa Barbara Foundation's vision, mission, and strategic plan. Rod Latham is a native to Santa Barbara and has spent over 20 years as a writer, director, and producer with theater and live events. He is the founding board president of the Marjorie Luke Theater and recently completed producing the Luke Theater virtual concert series. So Jackie, I'll turn it over to you and thank you.
Thank you, David and Charles and Hospice of Santa Barbara for inviting me to participate this evening. I think as a member of the Santa Barbara community and a huge fan of Hospice, we are really proud of the Illuminate series. And I'm just really honored to be here tonight with Rod and Daniel. Daniel, I am so grateful to you for that presentation. It was actually an opportunity to tune in what are some really busy, hectic, stressful times And I had a first question that I had originally wanted to sort of frame and toss to you, but now you've completely changed my entire mindset, because you've reminded me that of an experience that I had back in the 90s. And it was when I had 3 little kids and I was running a big organization, and I couldn't, I was starting to have anxiety, really busy, overload, starting to have anxiety. And I went to the doctor and they said, "Oh, well, you must be going through menopause." And I was like, "Well, no, I'm only in my 20s. That can't possibly be true." And they went back 3 times and they kept saying the same thing. I'm like, "No, that's not possible." So, or maybe it was, but I just didn't think that's what it was. And it turns out that after a lot of searching, what I found was pranayama, breathing techniques, ujjayi breathing, that 3-part breathing that you did in that in your presentation, and meditation. I will also say in my introduction to meditation, and for those of you who are out there tonight who are listening to this, my first experience was my John Kabat-Zinn, tape, my cassette tape, and I was listening to it. I went out and I spent the money on it, and I remember getting it, and I'm thinking, I sat down and listened to it, and there was just a lot of silence. And I thought, what the heck did I just pay for? Because this is, but the whole point was that you have to actually do whatever it takes to slow down and to tune in and to bring your whole, your parasympathetic system down. And I really appreciate you spending the time on that tonight, because as we are coming out of this pandemic as a community, we're all trying to figure out, how are we going to cope? And so one of the things that I know that Rod and I have talked about is we do want to know, what are some of those tools, and you've covered a lot of them in your presentation, that we can use ourselves, but also what are some of the things that we can do to support other people around us, whether it's our neighborhood, our neighbors, or our family, our friends, our employees, our colleagues. How can we help support them in the same thing that you helped us with tonight? And by the way, you were the focus of my gratitude in the circle of caring. I didn't know it was going to happen, but you said, "Who are you grateful for?" And I thought, I'm very grateful for you for what you've provided to us tonight. So let's start there. How can you help us in that way?
Well, I think first, help yourself. What you're doing with the pranayama and the yoga and meditation, it's perfect, because that calms you. So your presence, your calm presence for someone you care about, someone you want to help, communicates. Inner states are contagious, it turns out. So by being that calm presence, you're giving the gift to the other person of calm and presence. And I think that's a lot.
Thank you. Rod?
I thank you both, and it's an honor to be a part of this. And Daniel, thank you so much for the tools that you shared, and I love the stories you shared. In my public speaking, I always use stories, and it just makes things so much more easily to relate to. So thank you for that. Jackie and I were talking yesterday about today and things that we might cover and talk about, and I just want to acknowledge the value of the tools that you shared, the idea of how to get calm, how to be kind, and how to listen. And I think one of the things we talked about yesterday was the fact that with Santa Barbara Foundation and the nonprofit community, there's a lot of need right now. There's always a lot of need, but now it's exponential in terms of the need because of the pandemic. And I know Santa Barbara Foundation has been helping not only organizations that I'm involved with as a board member, but also the broad community in a lot of social service aspects. My involvement has been doing a series where we're giving arts to the community for free for streaming. And so we're providing spoken word and music and things to soothe and calm and relax and inspire people. And I think that's an important thing. But maybe you could talk a little more about how the fragility of people in the world today due to COVID and due to the fact that we have all come through this, what now we look back on and realize was a fairly traumatic time. For some people, much more so than others. Many people, lost jobs, lost homes, like couldn't eat, which is a huge, huge loss, all of those things. But as we interact with each other, the ideas that you had mentioned about listening and being calm and being kind and empathetic, maybe you could talk a little bit more about how that can be incorporated in businesses, in services where there's interaction with individuals, public, because I think we do need to be more conscious, more aware of people and how they're doing. And the fact that a lot of people don't want to admit they're fragile, but I think most of us are.
All of us are in some way. There's no
Yeah.
question. And I think that we can be kind in listening and questioning and being present to people and drawing them out and not forcing them to talk about any of this, but letting them talk about it if they want. And being a good listener, which means understanding, not trying to necessarily fix them, but to connect with them. I think that itself is a kind of a fix. That if you are with someone who's fragile in any of these ways, I guess I would call it honoring the fragility, acknowledging it in some way, and not judging it. That's very important.
Yeah.
But just being with it is something that you can do over and above any other help that you're giving. And I also don't want anyone to think that the presence replaces any concrete help, food, money, whatever it might be, position. I did a book for the Dalai Lama's 80th birthday called A Force for Good, where he outlined his vision for the world. And one of the things he said there in that book was how important it is to help the needy, as he put it. But what he meant was people who have needs. If you can help them find a way to find dignity in helping themselves is really the best thing you can do. And any way you can help, of course, is good. But the person you are as you do it is part of the gift you give.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want to pick up on that, Rod? Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that one of the things that we do so often every day in our life, if we interact with someone, is we regularly will say, "Hey, how are you? How you doing?"
That's true.
And we're in our culture. I can only speak for myself, but in my culture, it's your kind of knee-jerk reaction is, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine." But I'm finding that more and more people are not knee reacting with "I'm fine." They're pausing and going, well, and they have to think about it. And I just want to encourage everybody to be an ear to that, because people who are willing to be able to say, "I'm not fine. I'm actually had a really hard time," and I'm and support people in that. You may not, don't judge it, and you may not be able to help or fix it, but just being an ear to someone to say, "I hear you. I hear you, and I've had issues too." And sometimes it really helps to know you're not alone. But I think a lot of people have been isolated. I've been really isolated because I live alone, and so having very few people to talk to, it's nice to know you're not alone.
Beautiful. Thank
That's
you
great.
for that, Rod.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes.
I have a premise, and I think that a lot of the development and the sustainability of emotional intelligence happens at the individual level, as you've been talking about. But I also see that it happens at an organizational level as well. And I think I refer to that a lot as culture, organizational culture. And then at a community level. And I actually didn't see it as much in my previous, in several decades ago, until I got to Santa Barbara. And what I saw was that we have this ecosystem of really compassionate organizations and that have great cultures. But then through the pandemic, what I saw is that we have this entire county of organizations and of individuals that came together to support each other. And when I mean together, they were aware of their own strengths, what they had to offer as organizations or individuals, but then they were tuned in to what the needs of our community were, and they were able to reach out and help each other address those big challenges. And so I've now looking at this emotional intelligence in a scale sort of issue with the individual, the organization, and then the community. And we have the benefit of seeing so many wonderful organizations in our community. So I want to talk for a second about the organizational level. I know that sometimes we think of emotional intelligence, like we can do a training on that through the HR, and that's not what I'm talking about. And I don't think that is actually going to transform an organization to be, emotionally intelligent. But have you seen organizations that are particularly emotionally intelligent? You can almost identify an academic institution, say, yep, they're really smart. There's a lot of academic intelligence over there. But can you pinpoint those qualities of an organization that make it emotionally intelligent, and what can we do to support organizations to adopt those things?
Jackie, it's really interesting you asked this question right now. I'm writing an article for the Harvard Business Review on the emotionally intelligent organization. So I've been thinking about this quite a lot. And
Good.
Rod, you asked how this manifests in the business setting. It turns out that you're absolutely right. It's the culture, which is made up of the sum total of norms of interaction between people, that determines whether an organization is, quote, emotionally intelligent. But what's interesting, in the organizations we've studied that seem to manifest this, we see several elements at work. One is there's in every organization we've found so far, there's an influential person, a leader, who steps forward and articulates that this matters, and then uses HR as an ally. It's more forceful if the person is from the business side than HR per se, because in many organizations, the human resources department is looked at askance rather than with great respect, as it should be. But once HR is involved, then you can attract people when you're hiring them by letting them know this matters here. You can do in your performance reviews and in helping high potentials get further ahead, or in promoting people, you can let it be known that soft skills matter as much as hard skills here. And emotional intelligence is that skill set. And you can also train and develop people. But you're right. If you only do development and training, it's not enough, because it needs to be within a context where everyone knows this matters here. We value this. And in fact, the data shows that organizations that can manifest high levels of emotional intelligence do better by business metrics. The performance is better. Another important element here is the sense, and I think this works in the community too, I belong here. In my immediate group and my team, I feel at home, I feel relaxed, I can be honest, I can be authentic. Rod, it's that person who tells you how they actually feel, not just says, yeah, I'm fine, but here's what's happening in my life. And in order to do that, you have to have some level of trust in the relationship and the other person in the group and the team. And the highest performing teams, which turn out to be the most emotionally intelligent, have a norm of full honesty, being able to surface simmering tensions and settle them, deal with them. They know who's good at this and not so good at that. And they'll say this openly because everybody knows, because we're honest with each other here. So those are all elements. I can't give away the whole article because I'm still working on it, but those are some key pieces for you. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Well, and I have to give a shout out to our HR department. We've named our values. We've built it into our performance evaluation. So thank you for reaffirming all of that. Rod, I have another question, but you go ahead and
Please, go ahead.
Okay. I think it's another aspect of emotional intelligence, sort of our connection, not only to each other, but to the world around us. And so that we sort of have a perspective of our place in the big scheme of things. One side story, and reference to how wonderful our community is in Santa Barbara. And I'm sure you might have heard this from your relatives who live here. But one group of us and we were a small part in a big group, but saved 100 acres of land in 90 days, raised almost $18 million. Actually, they did raise $18 million to save 100 acres of land. And because there's a recognition of the importance of the environment, of a healthy environment ecosystem. So my career has been spent in urban greening and urban parks and being in densely populated areas and understanding the value of your connection to the tree, the pocket park, the neighborhood park. And so I guess my question for you is, do you see a role for our connection to the environment, to nature, to our ecosystem, and our place in it in emotional intelligence?
Well, in a book I did called Focus, I talk about 3 levels of awareness. One is awareness of yourself, which I've talked about tonight. Another is awareness of the other person. I've also talked about, but the third I didn't talk about it, but it speaks to your question. And that is a larger systems awareness, an awareness of the world around us, the context in which we operate. And we can have big blind spots here. I remember, I'll get back to the environment, but when I was in high school, my mother, who was a sociology teacher, hosted someone, a Nigerian anthropologist who came to my town in the Central Valley of California to study our caste system. What? This was like mind-blowing for me that we had a caste system, but we did. It was very clear to him. There's a bestseller now by Isabel Wilkerson at the New York Times, who's an African-American journalist, about the caste system in America. But we don't see it normally. It's invisible. We also, and now here's where the environment, we don't see our collective impact on the environment. We don't see the many ways in which our lifestyle in an aggregate creates global warming. California, I don't know about Santa Barbara, but I'm reading that California is having a huge heat wave now, which of course is very early, and it means that the fire season is likely to start earlier in California. And some substantial part of this is due to global warming. The thing about global warming is this: when you or I buy something, when I got this suit or this shirt, I didn't know that the cotton that went into the shirt is a very thirsty crop, and that organic cotton is even thirstier than regular cotton. I didn't know that the dyes used to make this dark blue can be toxic, and that in the countries in Asia where these clothes often are made, those dyes run off and pollute the groundwater or the drinking water of people and have toxic effects. In other words, what I'm saying is we have a blind spot around our day-to-day impacts. And I'm actually kind of on a crusade. There's a methodology called life cycle assessment, which can look at any product like this jacket from the time you harvest the crop, you weave the fabric, you dye the dye, et cetera, et cetera. At every step, it can assess impacts on the 8 global systems that support life on our planet, carbon being one of them. We don't hear much about the nitrogen system. There are others, water, all of that. So what it does is create a number, a metric that you can use to evaluate the impacts on the planet and on the environment of everything we buy and use. And that information, which we're now oblivious to, I think could make an enormous difference, because then we could make conscious choices for the better. We have total transparency fiscally. If you're going to buy a stock, you can know anything about the company. But if you're going to buy a jacket, you know nothing about its impacts. And I think in the future, particularly younger generations, will start to insist on this. So I think smart companies will be first in their sector, first movers to do this. Anyway, I want to applaud Santa Barbara for having done what you did with the land. That's a great step, but we can go much further.
Mm-hmm. We're looking into the circular economy as we speak. So I appreciate your comments there. We do, Rod, did you have a question? Because I know we have some in our chat and we have about 45 seconds.
I apologize for the phones. I tried to mute all my phones. It didn't work. I was going to just put a quick pitch in for the power of intention. You mentioned that in some of your tools. And I think the Saving the Foothills here was a classic example of the intention so many people had in this community to make amazing things happen in a very short amount of time. But I'm going to go back to you because I know we have other questions and we're running out of time.
I think we're out of time, and I want to apologize to the 11 question, those who posed questions in the chat. I am told we have to wrap it up. Daniel Goleman, thank you so very much for being here with us in Santa Barbara, virtually, albeit, but with us tonight. Really appreciate this. Rod, thank you for being our partner, my partner tonight on this panel. And I'm going to turn it back to you, David.
Before you do that, I want to thank you. I wish I were actually in Santa Barbara. David, yes, to you.
Thank you so much, Daniel Goleman, and thank you, Jackie Carrera and Rod Latham, for being with us tonight. This was truly, truly wonderful to be present with all of you. And with the questions that came up from folks, we will note those questions and connect them to Daniel for future response. So thank you for your questions tonight, everyone. We are so pleased at Hospice of Santa Barbara to be able to offer this Illuminate Speaker Series free, but we could not do it without your help, as I've shared throughout this whole series. So please consider, as Charles said early on, making a donation to ensure the future of this series by using one of the methods shown here on the screen. And please visit also our website, shown here as well, to sign up for upcoming Illuminate series events. Again, these are freely offered to everyone, but pre-registration is required ahead of time, so please note that. So thank you all. Have a good rest of the day and evening, and be well.